Hey everyone, Pugs here, and welcome to the video where I will be reviewing Season 1 of SpongeBob SquarePants. I'm really excited for this one because, as you can see, things are going to be a little different in this video than in my typical reviews, obviously with the clearest thing being the tier list. But as you can also see by the timestamps I hopefully put on this video, I'm going to do more than just rank the episodes, as I've also got a lot to say about this season as a whole, as well as, doing some closing thoughts as always. Before I do all that though, I'll give a nice and detailed description of my rating system, since it's been a while since I've done so, and even in my first video when I did it, I didn't really quite explain what goes into each rating, so I thought it might be good to do that, in this video today before I put everything in a tier list. And before I even do that, I just want to quickly say thank you to everyone who's been watching my reviews. You guys are great, and I didn't think I'd get any attention at all when I was doing these. So it's been nice to interact with some of you guys under my videos if you comment, or it's just been nice to see that there are people watching. And with all that said and done, knowing that this video is going to be pretty long, why don't we just go ahead and get right into it? So, like I said in the introduction, I wanted to go ahead and explain my rating system since I've been working on trying to verbalize the criteria for each tier. Now, obviously, this is the exact same rating system I've been using, this whole time, so if you've seen any of my reviews so far, you should be very familiar with this, but I thought it would be good to bring it back for this overview. So one important note about my rating system is that it's relative. I don't think I ever explained this, but it's kind of relative. So by this, I mean there's only one episode in the entire show that will get a 10, and that's my favorite episode. And there's also only one episode in the entire show that will get a 0, and that's my least favorite episode. And everything else will be in between those two scores. Now, the reason I said kind of relative, made that qualification is because, it's not like I'm scoring every, other episode in the show in comparison to my favorite and least favorite. Those episodes are just the anchor points. So hopefully that makes sense. So let me just go ahead and get into the tiers. So starting at the very top in red, we've got my amazing tier. Episodes in this tier receive scores anywhere between a 9.0 and a 10. This is probably the most self-explanatory of all my tiers. For an episode to get up here, it's got to be really, really good. Usually for these episodes, I have no problems with them at all. Or if I do have any problems, they're very, very minor. And I also kind of describe episodes in this tier as having some kind of subjective wow factor that really makes me love them a lot. And then going down, the next tier in orange is my great tier. So episodes in this tier receive scores anywhere between an 8.0 and an 8.9. Obviously, these episodes are just a step down from amazing. They usually lack that wow factor I just said, or at lower ends of this tier, typically they have one or two real issues, but nothing too serious that takes away from how enjoyable and amusing the episode is. And then going down another level, in the yellow is my good tier. So for these episodes here receive scores between 7.0 and 7.9. Good tier episodes are typically enjoyable, but they lack in some key area like comedy or entertainment, for example. The main difference between episodes in this tier and the one below is that I'm still generally fine with purposefully rewatching episodes in this tier, literally seeking them out. Not if I'm doing a whole big rewatch, but seeking them out. So but the ones below, I don't usually seek them out. So that's the big difference, I feel like. And then for the next one, the green, my okay tier, episodes here receive scores anywhere between a 6.0 and a 6.9. Okay tier episodes typically can be described as boring, not that funny, and or dull. These episodes aren't failures, but they aren't that good either. But they also don't really exactly irritate or upset me or anything like that. Or, on the off chance that they do bring up some of those feelings, that it's usually counteracted by something good about the episode. So these are very average episodes. They're, they're okay. Then next, for the ones in blue, my mediocre tier, episodes here receive scores between 5.0 and 5.9. I usually describe these episodes as failing at what they set out to do. And the biggest difference between this tier and okay tier is that these episodes they fall flatter, and they actually do start to irritate me, upset me, just a bit. Typically with no real redemption or anything to counteract that, or at least if there is some kind of counteracting good point in the episode, it's not enough. And then next in purple for my tolerable tier, which by the way, that means barely tolerable, but I like having one word for everything. So for my tolerable tier, episodes here receive scores anywhere between 4.0 and 4.9. These episodes actually upset me for one reason or another and personally irritate or annoy me without any kind of redemption. The biggest difference between this tier and mediocre tier is that while mediocre tier episodes may not be funny, these episodes are unfunny. If you guys can see the difference between that. Their entertainment value is actively being sabotaged by the episode's worst qualities. And importantly though, these episodes still have entertainment value, which is what separates this tier from the next two. And that's also why the next two tiers are actually kind of hard for episodes to reach, because I usually do find some kind of entertainment value in almost every episode. It's really hard for me to say this episode just has nothing for me. I usually try and see the best in everything, so maybe that's why. Anyway, so moving on down to my second to last tier in black is the bad tier. Episodes here receive scores anywhere between 3.0 and 3.9. These episodes not only upset me, but upset me greatly. It is a certifiably unpleasant experience watching these episodes, from which I have no escape, which is the biggest difference between this tier and tolerable. These episodes still have some redeeming qualities, a good joke here and there, or an interesting plot or something, but they hardly, these redeeming qualities, they hardly really make a dent on my enjoyment of the episode. And then for the very bottom of the tier list in the white or gray, I guess, we have my abysmal tier. And episodes here receive scores anywhere between 0.0 and 2.9. And episodes in this tier are just horrendous pieces of garbage that I avoid like the plague. There's almost nothing redeemable or enjoyable about these episodes, and the negative emotions I feel when watching them run pretty high. And just like amazing tier episodes are great tier episodes with a wow factor, abysmal tier episodes are bad tier episodes with an ew factor. And I just want to say that this tier, it's super hard to reach. As I'm recording this, I'm really close to finishing my season 5 written reviews. Not a single episode has reached abysmal tier yet. That's how hard it is to get there. I don't know if one has even reached bad yet. So if one has, it's only been one. If not, then nothing has reached bad yet. So these are two very difficult tiers to reach. I'm just saying. And so that's the rating system. Hopefully now we've all got a pretty good idea of what's going through my head when I assign ratings. Of course, a lot of my ratings are kind of done based on vibes, so sometimes it might seem like an episode doesn't quite fit the descriptions I laid out here, and, I kind of don't care if that happens, to be honest. I don't really have the time or energy to sit back, make an Excel sheet, scoring every last detail. I don't have time for that. I'm here for vibes, and that's all reviewing is. It's vibes. I don't know what you want me to say. And anyway, so now that we're all on the same page, I think it's high time we get to the tier list. So as you can see, I'm here on tiermaker.com with my nice little SpongeBob Season 1 tier list maker already pre-filled in with my chosen tiers. I'm not really sure how much I need to explain from here. I guess I'll just put episodes in the tiers. I'm going to go in descending order just because I want to be able to clearly state my top 5, bottom 5, and I also wanted to be able to resolve conflicts between episodes that I gave the same score, and I thought it'd be easier to just, have it in descending order. So we're just going to start from the top 5, and I'll also put these in the timestamps just so it's very clear what my top 5 and bottom 5 are. So with my top 5, all of these are going to be in the amazing tier just because I had, more than 5 amazing tier episodes this season. So I guess let's just get right into our top 5. So for my number 1 episode, this should be clear. I definitely made it clear in the review, but it's going to be Culture Shock because that came in at a 9.7 out of 10. That was the highest score of the season. Easily the best episode of the season. It's hilarious, uses its minutes wisely, has iconic moments. It's just, I don't know, the atmosphere of the first minute or two is palpable. This episode is just great. It does everything amazing and perfectly. It's just an amazing episode and my best of the season. For the second best, so my number 2, I guess, that will go to Walking Small, actually, because it came in at a 9.5 out of 10, which was also a unique score this season. and so it will be my second best. It's a really funny episode with one of my favorite dynamics between SpongeBob and Plankton. It's an underrated gem, in my opinion, so that is why it is number 2. For number 3, so for the last 3 episodes of this top 5, they all have the same score of a 9.4 out of 10. So I guess I should try and explain why I like one over the other. So for number 3, it's going to be Scaredy Pants. And so I chose this one because, I said it in the review. I love Halloween. I love the atmosphere in this episode. It's just vibes, and more vibes. And it's just hilarious and, just vibes. That's really all I can say. It's just such a good episode. And I just think you can really see all the love and care put into this episode. And, as someone who loves Halloween, I appreciate that. So that's why it's number 3. And as for number 4, which, again, also came in with a 9.4 out of 10, that will be Texas. And I just love this episode because it's funny. It's just super funny, and it has some good character interactions and exploration. This episode is probably fresh on everyone's mind because, I just reviewed it just a little bit ago, so not too much more to say on that. And then for the last of the top 5, but not the last of Amazing Tier, obviously, that will be Pizza Delivery. So this episode, it's just simply iconic. And, for good reason. It has great dynamics between SpongeBob and Squidward, really encapsulates everything I love about them, including the part, where Squidward actually likes SpongeBob deep down. It's just, he likes him enough to get mad when someone is rude to SpongeBob and makes him cry. It's just really wholesome and sweet, and it's just a good episode. So that's my top 5. And so now I'll just go on to the rest of the Amazing Tier. So there are 2 more episodes that also came in at a 9.4 out of 10, but just missed being in the top 5. So first of all, we got Pickles. Where is that? Okay, here it is. Pickles. So it's just very good, very vibe heavy with that Western feel, but it's just shy of the humor of Pizza Delivery, which is why it missed out on the top 5. And then the other one that got a 9.4 out of 10 was Fun. And this one, again, it's mostly the humor that just kind of made it miss out. This episode definitely has a lot more slower moments than anything else of its same score, but that's not a bad thing, but that just means that it didn't make the top 5. And then for other Amazing Tier episodes, so with a 9.3 out of 10 was Help Wanted. And so obviously this is just a great episode. Great intro to the series. I definitely went into it with a lot of detail in my original review, so you guys, you know how I feel. And then at a 9.2 out of 10, we had Jellyfish Jam. So that'll go right after Help Wanted. Also just a good episode. There really isn't too much to say about it. I love SpongeBob being with the jellyfish. I love the whole interlude with the dancing in the middle. It's just it's a funny episode, but a very understated funny episode. So that's why it comes in the lower end of amazing, I guess. And then we actually have a lot of episodes, and I guess this is probably my most common score that I give, just a plain 9 out of 10, because to really get into Amazing Tier is really hard for an episode to do. So that's why a lot of episodes just get 9 out of 10. And so we have quite a few that reached 9 out of 10. So trying to parse them out was a little hard for me because doing ranks is really hard. But here's what I came up with. So for the first episodes, the best of the 9 out of 10s, I guess, we have Arg. I don't know, I hate saying that one. It just sounds so unserious. But anyway, I think it's the funniest and most interesting plot out of all the rest of the 9 out of 10s, so that's why it's at the top of that. Then next would be Plankton. So this was just a great introduction to Plankton. It's a very funny episode, full of good vibes. I love that it takes place pretty much entirely at night. It's just a really good episode. Next is Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost. So where are you? There we go. Oh my gosh. There we go. All right. So I just love how macabre this episode is, and I think it's hilarious. And I went on that whole tangent during the review about certain unsettling vibes of that one scene in the hallway, and I think that really adds to the episode for me. So I just really like this episode. Not too much to say about it. In the third place, I guess, of the 9 out of 10s. And then a little below Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost, we have Karate Choppers. So has some fun gags at the beginning, and good tension at the end with like Sandy and SpongeBob trying not to do karate and then like, ending up having to just give up. And I like how the episode ends, with everything, turning out all right. I mean, most episodes do that, but you know what I mean. I like that Sandy and SpongeBob get to put their karate to good use. And then after Karate Choppers will be Fools in April. There we go. So this is another episode I just kind of reviewed really recently, but it's a very interesting episode. It has, layered plot and humor, as I talked in depth about during my review. So there really isn't too much I need to say about that one. And then after Fools in April comes Suds. Here we go. So I think this is also another underrated gem. It has some fun dynamics between Patrick and Sandy especially, and I just really like this episode. It's pretty funny, pretty cute. I like it. I don't know. It's really hard for me to like say a bunch of words when I'm not doing a whole review and like differentiate my opinions between episodes, but yeah. So after Suds comes Naughty Nautical Neighbors, and so I really like the dramatic soap opera-esque nature of this episode. I think it's a real strength here, and, I just love my dramatics, and I just think it's really fun for this plot. And then after that is probably a little bit surprisingly, given how low it is on this amazing tier, but is SB129. It's an iconic episode, of course, but it's also like relatively slow compared to other episodes, and typically I am more of a fast-paced kind of person, which is why I'm really excited to get into seasons 2 and 3, but anyway, I am like a fast-paced type of person, so like even though this episode is good, it does have those slow vibes, but I did like the liminal vibes, especially at the beginning, so, you win some, you lose some. And then for the last episode in my amazing tier, so it's kind of hard to say like the worst of the best, I guess, but that will go to Boating School. And obviously this is still a really good episode, but if I could rewatch like all of the episodes in my amazing tier except one, then Boating School would be probably the one that's left out. And not for any specific reason, but I guess like even though this episode does have jokes, like the jokes don't really hit as hard for me, so it's like, okay, like that changes my enjoyment a little bit, but it's still like a really good episode. Obviously it wouldn't be an amazing otherwise. Clearly has that wow factor, So now I guess I will move on down to my great tier. So we'll start with the best of the greats and go down to, I guess, the worst of the greats. So for the best of the great tier episodes, we have Sleepy Time coming in first because it came in with a score of 8.8 out of 10 when I reviewed it. And, there's just a lot of interesting character exploration in this episode and with some real standout jokes. And I'm kind of really impressed with how they like balanced the time in this episode because of how many characters there were and how many dreams we looked at. So I think it was an impressive episode from a writing standpoint, in my opinion. And then the next two episodes have the same score, but obviously one's going to win out over the other. And the one that wins out for the score of 8.7 out of 10 will be Tea at the Tree Dome. And so being introduced to Sandy really like brings this episode like a leg up compared to A Bubble Stand, which is the other episode with an 8.7 out of 10. So that's really all I have to say on that one. I think they have the same amount of like humor that makes me laugh, but like really just seeing Sandy in this episode and meeting her and, getting to see the impressive writing that is, a character introduction. It really just like gives this episode a leg up compared to Bubble Stand, which I'll just put up next. And I mean, Bubble Stand also great episode, iconic, hilarious, has some good dynamics, really like explores the Squidward SpongeBob Patrick dynamic because this is only the 4th episode of the show, so we hadn't seen that too much yet. So good episode. And then for the next 4 episodes, they're all going to come in with an 8.5 out of 10. And so the episodes for this are The Paper, The Chaperone, Reef Blower, and Hall Monitor. And so out of those 4, the one that will come in as the best of these 8.5s out of 10 will be Hall Monitor, actually. And so Hall Monitor, I just think it's a very hilariously dramatic episode, and as I've said before, I love my dramatics, okay? When things just get like crazy, like overreactions, just like dramatization, expressive animation, any of that kind of stuff, like I just love it. So Hall Monitor really gets a leg up because of that. And then for the next one out of the 8.5s out of 10 we have The Chaperone, which also could come as a surprise, given popular opinion. I don't know. But I just think it's a very wholesome episode, and I think the ending is very, like, unexpected, and I think that really helps because it just makes it really funny. But again, just super wholesome episode, and I love me some wholesomeness. And also, you know, we get to see Pearl, and we get to really, like, kind of see her dynamic with SpongeBob, which I think was really nice. And then for the next one, out of the 8.5s out of 10s, it will be The Paper. So I just think that this is a very varied episode. There's a lot of, like, it's not a very plot heavy episode, like, at all. Like, it takes place in the same place pretty much the entire time with the same piece of paper, but it's a very gag heavy episode. And even if not every gag works for me, which is why it was in the great tier, not amazing, it was still, like, very varied, and I appreciate that. And then the last of our 8.5s out of 10 will be Reef Blower. And so being a short kind of put Reef Blower at a disadvantage here, comparing it to, you know, other episodes of the same caliber of that 8.5 out of 10. It's still a great, hilarious episode, though, but, you know, just being that short means that there aren't as many minutes to appreciate here, and there aren't as many opportunities for this episode to really, like, be super good for me. And so then, moving on for the rest of the great tier, so the only episode that came in with a score of 8.4 out of 10 is Jellyfishing, and this is just a really enjoyable episode. Introduces us to jellyfishing, has some fun gags, also, you know, really plays with the dynamic of Patrick, SpongeBob, and Squidward, so, you know, nothing to complain about here. Certain parts drag just a tiny bit, but that's about it. And then the only episode that came in with a score of 8.2 out of 10 is Rock Bottom, so it will go up next. And this episode, this was also one that I reviewed pretty recently, so it should be fresh on everyone's mind. But, you know, this episode was really good, but it did have hints of frustration, which made it lose automatic points with me, and that's why it's at the lower end of the great tier. And then 3 different episodes came in at a score of 8 out of 10, which would round out the great tier. So the episodes that came in with a score of 8 out of 10, that's Sandy's Rocket, Employee of the Month, and Ripped Pants. And so I kind of just said them in order accidentally. I meant to mix them up, but I didn't. So the one that will come in first out of these 8 out of 10s will be Sandy's Rocket. So up there. And so it's not the funniest episode of the show, but it's still a very funny episode. It takes a little bit to get started, and that's why it's so low on this tier. And then after that is Employee of the Month. So this is a very repetitive episode, and it only really works depending on my mood, like I said in the review. So if I'm really feeling it, then it's really good because I love all the gags and I love the repetitiveness. If I'm not feeling it, then I get bored because I'm not feeling the gags. So it really just depends, and that's why it's at the lowest end of the great tier. And then for our last episode of the great tier, that will be Ripped Pants, which also could come as a surprise. I know popular opinion on this episode's pretty high, but I really do like this episode. It's just, I hate secondhand embarrassment. I just do. I've said this anytime it comes up, and I'm going to continue to say it anytime it comes up. I just cannot stand that. So that's why it's at the very end of the great tier. And yeah, so that's the great tier. So I guess we'll just move on to the good tier. And then also because, 3 of the episodes on the great tier, or not great, on the good tier will also be in my bottom 5, so we'll just like cover the higher ends of the great tier, and then I'll just like move on to my bottom 5. So for the great tier, a lot of episodes came in at the same score here actually. So we have 4 episodes that came in with a 7.8 out of 10, and those are Valentine's Day, SpongeBob SquarePants, I Was a Teenage Gary, and Neptune Spatula. And so at the top of the great tier is an episode that I'm sure will probably also surprise, you know, popular opinion. And that is I Was a Teenage Gary. I just think that's the best of the goods. And it's, you know, it's a pretty solid episode throughout. The middle is just a little weird and off, like when SpongeBob transforms into a snail, like I said during my review. So that's just my big qualm with the episode. And then next up in the good tier will be SpongeBob SquarePants. So this episode has a good beginning and end, but there are some elements of secondhand embarrassment here that I don't like at all. And the episode's not like especially funny. I mean, there are some pretty funny moments, especially near the end, but like, yeah. So that's why it's in the good tier, and that's why it's a little below I Was a Teenage Gary, even though they have like the same score. And then also in the 7.8 out of 10, I guess, subscale of good, I don't know, is Valentine's Day. So this episode, it's adorable, but I do get frustrated with Patrick's behavior as the episode goes on, so that's why it comes a little lower than the Muscle Bob Buff Pants. And then as the last of the 7.8 out of 10s, we have Neptune's Spatula. And so for this episode, it's a good, enjoyable episode with a great beginning, but there are some missed opportunities here that really drag the episode down. This is another episode that I reviewed very recently, so my opinions on here are pretty fresh. And yeah, so I guess I said all that. What was it? The Patty battle thing was kind of a missed opportunity. There could have been more, but yeah. And then I have 2 more episodes that are in the good tier that aren't in the bottom 5. So these episodes, I guess, they also come in with the same score, actually. So they also come in with a 7.5 out of 10. And the first one of those is Squeaky Boots. And so the drama of this episode, it really just makes it edge out over the other episode that was also a 7.5 out of 10. But the reason I did put it this low was because the squeaking was very annoying to me. So yeah. And the other episode that didn't make my bottom 5, but was also in the good tier, was Opposite Day. And so for this episode, it had some really funny moments, but I do find myself starting to feel as frustrated as Squidward by the end of it. And also, Squidward's just a bit too mean-spirited at the end of the episode. I think it was a bit too much. If this was an episode like Good Neighbors or something, then what he did would make more sense, but here it just didn't work as well. So that's at the end of my good tier. And so now I'll be talking about my bottom 5, which will encompass both some good tier episodes and okay tier episodes. So that'll be fun. Yeah. So I guess for number 5 of my bottom 5, so the best of the worst, I guess, that is going to Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 2. So for this episode, it was enjoyable, but it was very disjointed with a weak first section. And also this episode came in with a 7.3 out of 10. I guess I should have made that clear. But yeah, so it was a little disjointed, had a weak first section, but the second section of the episode was really good. So that's why it's not too bad, And then the next 2 episodes of my bottom 5 came in with the same score of a 7 out of 10. And the first of those, so the better of them, I guess, for me, so the one that comes in at number 4 will be Home Sweet Pineapple. So it was kind of just on the dull side for me. There isn't really too much to say about it. I mean, it's still a good episode, still enjoyable, but it was a little dull for me, so that's why it's in the bottom 5. And then for the last episode of my good tier and the third episode of my bottom tier, that will be Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, the first one. This one also came in with a score of 7 out of 10. I just kind of have the same complaint as Home Sweet Pineapple here. This episode was kind of dull in many places, but also the characters of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy aren't super compelling to me, even if I do love the idea of them, so they didn't really help out here. And then for the 2 episodes that are in my okay tier, one of them I reviewed very recently, so you probably know which one I'm putting where, but these episodes have slightly different scores, so one has a 6.9 out of 10 and the other one has a 6.8 out of 10. So the episode that will come in second place for worst episode, I don't know, my second bottom tier episode, so that's Nature Pants. This episode is bumped down to the okay tier because I just kind of find it to be very out of character and a little bit disjointed, and it kind of has many dull moments, but there are some really good things in here, which is why it's not in mediocre or something. The whole part of Patrick and Sandy was really enjoyable, but yeah, this episode is definitely in okay tier, but 6.9 out of 10, so that's not too bad. And then for our last episode, so the worst episode of season 1 for me, that came in with a 6.8 out of 10 is, of course, Hooky. So this episode has a strong beginning that kind of just gives way to a disappointing and unpleasant and kind of creepy ending. Easily the worst of the season for me, even if it is scored pretty close to Nature Pants. I just didn't feel like scoring it any lower than that. But yeah, so yeah, I guess this is a tier list. Season 1 as a whole did pretty good. I mean, a lot of amazing, a lot of great, a good chunk of good and only 2 okay tiers and like nothing below that. So that's pretty good. And yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say for the tier list. So I'll just go ahead and go back to my normal style of how I record videos, and we will talk about the rest of the season, I guess. Now that I've ranked all the episodes and therefore kind of given an idea of where the season stands in terms of number of episodes in each tier, I wanted to go ahead and share the average episode rating for this season before I get into like the really long discussion. I don't really give like seasons tiers or anything, so I thought like an average episode rating would be like a decent proxy and a way to kind of compare seasons as I go along. So the average episode rating for season 1 was an 8.4 out of 10, which, if this was an episode, would obviously mean great tier, but spoiler alert, the average episode rating for each season will never be in the typical like amazing tier level just because of how math works. So my rating system doesn't really translate from episode to season very well, especially when we consider that season 1 is, as of now, probably my 4th favorite season, ? Not really sure. Let's just ignore that for today. But anyway, to me, this 8.4 out of 10 means that, like, as a whole, the season was really, really good. Sure, there were a couple duds here and there, but no season is without those. And this is a season that I love to revisit, and it's one that encapsulates so much of what I love about this show. And I'll actually be talking about that specific thing, like, at length in the next section, so let's just, shimmy on over to the general discussion of season 1 of SpongeBob SquarePants. Now that you've all seen my thoughts on all the episodes and have seen the average episode rating, and now that we've just gotten through all of that, I want to talk about my general thoughts on season 1 as a whole. And if you've been watching any of my episode reviews, especially like the very first one, then you all should be very well aware that I believe that this season is an excellent entry into SpongeBob SquarePants. And I mean that in every kind of way, from characters to world to atmosphere to writing to humor, all of it. Well, writing and humor are actually interesting ones, so I'll get to those in a bit, but let me talk about the other stuff first. So, season 1 shows us exactly what is at the heart of this show with, SpongeBob SquarePants himself. SpongeBob is especially adorable this season, which although that's a thread that runs through every season, it's made especially prevalent here, and it has a kind of prevalence that won't really be returned to until season 10 or 11. And more importantly, this season demonstrates the crucial line in this show, the adult-child line. SpongeBob himself encapsulates this line, being a childlike adult, but the show itself also toes the line with its humor and settings. And season 1 adequately, actually more than adequately, introduces nearly every major player in the show, and it does so with great humor. I talk about this at length in my very first review as well, particularly when discussing Help Wanted and Tea at the Tree Dome. I also talk about this in my Plankton review, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts about this, you can check those out. I'm just trying not to make this review insanely long. It's already long. But anyway, speaking of characters, season 1 really shows us right from the beginning that this is a show with an ensemble cast. And although it was limited in character interactions, we got to see our main characters often enough to really get that ensemble feeling. And season 1 showcases the same kind of masterful use of background music that we see in the rest of the show, which makes sense considering that, this is the origin. And at some point, I really do want to talk about how much I love the background music in the show, but for now, I'll restrain myself and say that the music choices in the show are excellent, and, 99% of the time, they fit the scene perfectly. And especially as, we go on and we get more original, music made for the show that really fit the scenes. And, lastly, season 1 is also the origin point of, some other iconic parts of the show, like the My Leg gag, so I just thought that was a thing I needed to note. And, this season, it might be the entryway into SpongeBob SquarePants, but there are also some things about it that set it apart from everything else that we'll be seeing from this franchise. And these things can all really be summed up as, the vibes of this season, though there are different parts to this vibes descriptor. So, firstly, season 1 has a very different atmosphere compared to the rest of the show. And I mentioned this in, I believe, my Plankton and Culture Shock reviews, but, season 1 used a lot of surf rock music compared to the rest of the show, And I've already talked about how this season is, exemplary of the music use of this show, so I won't reiterate that, but I will say that the show largely leaves behind the surf rock vibe after this season. And this difference in music actually goes right into the point that I've been making in probably every single video thus far, which is that season 1 as a whole has a much more slowed and relaxed atmosphere compared to the rest of the show. The darker and muted colors, which I think was a result of how the show was produced, but don't quote me on that because I couldn't find a source, even though I'm pretty sure I've heard it before. But anyway, the dark and muted colors, it adds to this vibe. They're like less vibrant and energetic than later seasons, and where this vibe shows the most is in the way these episodes are written. So like where later seasons of the show run, season 1 kind of saunters. Like the jokes come in consistently, but they do so at a slower pace. And it works here because the jokes aren't necessarily quick-witted and rapid slapstick or anything like that, but they're more about build-up. And plots are heavier to make up for the lack of constant gags too. And this season is like quieter compared to the rest of the show. And it feels almost ludicrous to call a show like SpongeBob SquarePants quiet, but that's just what season 1 is, and that's what sets it apart. And I think the best thing, or most fundamental thing that I can say about season 1 is that it is so clearly a labor of love. You can tell so much time and effort and care was put into this season, and you can see it everywhere. The carefully chosen and crafted music, the gorgeous backgrounds I've raved about for review after review, because, those artists clearly went off. And I haven't mentioned this much, but like the animation of these episodes is excellent too. So the animators clearly worked hard. And then of course we have the storyboarders and the writers and the editors. They must have been putting in some real work for the quality of the writing to be so high. And obviously, I can't go without talking about the voice actors who helped bring all of these characters and episodes to life with their hard-won skills. I'm not really the kind of person who believes in talent, so I always try to compliment skills and effort and creativity rather than natural proclivity, because that doesn't really mean anything to me. But anyway, the time and effort and care put into this season is written all over it. And this kind of behind the scenes work builds the foundation for every other season moving forward because, based on the comments of crew members over the years, SpongeBob SquarePants is a show crafted with love at its center. And I think season 1 really shows that. And, that's one thing that just cannot be stressed enough, okay? This season 1, it is fundamental. It is the foundation of everything SpongeBob SquarePants is today. Even if the writers and the voice actors and everyone on the creative team were all just getting their footing in this season, and even if the show has gone through many changes over the years, season 1 is still the heart of SpongeBob SquarePants, and I think that's the biggest takeaway from watching this season and rewatching it and reviewing all the episodes. Season 1 is the foundation. It is the foundational season. And yeah, I guess those are my general thoughts on season 1, and I just think that it's really important to just say that, season 1, it's super good. It's the entryway into the show. It's the heart of it. It's the core. And it's foundational. It's fundamental. It's everything this show is now, even if the show feels removed. It started here. And that's why this is the most important season of the show, even if it's not the most enjoyable. Yep, even in a video that's nothing but closing thoughts, I'm going to be giving my closing thoughts. So, oh my god, this was a long-ass video. Oh my lord. This is a true test of my video making abilities. But yeah, I'm looking at the timestamp that it's at right now, and ooh, that's scary. But making this video, was it a pain in the ass? Yeah, but it was kind of fun. So I guess I'll keep up the tier list, as long as I keep up these reviews. But hopefully the video just wasn't boring. I was writing the script being man, that's a lot of words, but I couldn't not say them. So I don't know. I get all self-conscious about these things until I remember that these videos are for me first, and then, anyone else interested in watching them. So then I feel good. And I also just wanted and needed to expand on the written reviews here. And there's just so much to say about season 1 especially, so I like to talk. Yeah, so y'all know I just had to save this for last, but thank you to everyone who has watched my videos, liked my videos, and or commented on my videos. I know I keep saying all of this, but it doesn't get any less true. Like, this whole series started out of an impulse, and I've been a little shocked at the response I've gotten. So, like, as a rule, I try not to pay much attention to things like views and likes to, prevent becoming preoccupied by them and, like, really worrying about them because, like, I really don't want to care about it. But of course, they're made to get you addicted to it. That's a whole other thing. Anyway, but like, I do see those statistics every so often. It's usually when I'm like uploading a new video because, it's on there on the like creator studio, whatever you want to call it. So I do see them, even if I try to ignore them. And I'm just like surprised that there's even like one person willing to sit down and listen to my thoughts on this show. And it really does mean a lot to me that there seems to be a good group of you guys out there, which actually includes some of my real life friends. So big shout out to you guys. You guys are the people who see my SpongeBob obsession in person in real time and still want to hear more from me. So you guys are great. And even all the people who don't know me in real life, you guys are great too. So in terms of logistical type of stuff, new video will probably come out next Saturday, so in a week. So I'll kind of have a break between this season and the next. Yeah, I don't know. I guess not. Who knows? But yeah, so that video will kick off the season 2 reviews, and I'm excited because I am kind of working on a couple of new things that I want to launch in those reviews that may or may not happen. And don't get too excited. Like, the videos will pretty much look the exact same. Like, they're not big things that I'm launching, but I am working on a tiny little thing. But yeah. So hopefully I'll be able to get to do that with our next 2 episodes, which is Your Shoes Untied and Squid's Day Off. And with that, I think I've said just about everything I can say today. So I'll close this obscenely long video here and just say that I'll see y'all next time.